So the problem for Tottenham in this game was that their midfield was far too deep, and this allowed Jorginho and the Chelsea deeper lying players far too much time to receive the ball and progress the ball into Tottenham's defensive third. This was almost like a Jose Mourinho Tottenham performance. Antonio Conte's side were far too conservative, and by being overly concerned about stopping Chelsea's players gaining space in between their midfield and defensive lines, they neglected the space between the forward and the midfield line, and this was where Chelsea were able to win the midfield battle and dominate the majority of the game. And I will be breaking down how they managed to do this and what I would have done differently if I was Conte. But before I tell you about that, for cheap, good quality football jerseys, retro jerseys and tracksuits, go over to www.jerseyfifa.com. I myself have bought a number of different jerseys from Jersey FIFA, and they've all been high quality at a fantastic price. And I'd have to say my favourite is my Manchester United 2003-2004 shirt with Ronaldo on the back. So if you do want a current season or a retro jersey or even a tracksuit, click the link in the description and use code ATLANTISFOOTBALL with a space at checkout to get 5% off. So from the start of the game, we saw Chelsea's 4-3-3 system become a 2-3-2-3 shape in possession, with Antonio Conte's side defending in a deep 4-4-2 shape. So for Tuchel's side, we would see Jorginho playing as that deep single pivot and Kovacic and Mount either side of him, but we would see Mason Mount pushing up a lot more than Kovacic, trying to get in behind Højbjerg. And in order to address this, what we saw Conte's side do is have Harry Kane and Bergwijn play as a front two, looking to cut the passing lanes from the centre backs into Jorginho, with Højbjerg and Harry Winks being instructed to drop deep to close up that space when Mason Mount and Kovacic try to get in behind them. And in order to close off the space for Chelsea's wide attackers, we saw Conte instruct the two fullbacks to follow Callum Hudson-Odoi and Ziyech when they moved into deeper positions on the flank. And now obviously with the fullbacks pushing so high up the pitch to follow their player, this would create a big space between the centre backs and the fullbacks, and we saw Mason Mount in particular looking to make runs into this space, and so Conte instructed Højbjerg and Winks to follow Mount and Kovacic when they moved into this position. However, whilst this did solve the issue of stopping Chelsea's players being able to get space in between Tottenham's back line, because Tottenham were only playing with a midfield double pivot in the centre of the pitch, this meant that Tottenham left a massive space in the centre of the field. So when Chelsea moved the ball out wide and then back inside, they could then exploit the massive amount of space in central midfield that had been vacated by Højbjerg and Winks' movement deep. Now I am going to explain what I think Conte should have done differently to combat this issue, but first let's look at the tactics that Tuchel deployed to give Chelsea such success in possession. So when Tuchel was using the 3-4-3 with Chelsea, what we would see is the wide attackers in the front three, instead of holding their width, would move in field into the half space. However, in this game in the 4-3-3, Tuchel instructed the two wide players to hold their advanced width on the flanks, and he did this in order to pin the Tottenham fullbacks back, creating more space between the Tottenham midfield and defensive lines. See, if Ziyech and Callum Hudson-Odoi had shifted in field into the half space, this would have allowed Tanganga and Ben Davies to move in field into narrower positions, reducing the space between the lines. However, Tuchel was very clever with his positioning of players on the flanks by having Ziyech and Callum Hudson-Odoi. Not only were Tanganga and Ben Davies forced to sit wider, creating more space between the Tottenham centre-backs and full-backs and between the midfield line, but with the two Chelsea full-backs, Azpilicueta on the right and Sarr on the left, holding quite deep positions in possession, this forced Doherty and Sessegnon to retain higher positions in that midfield line, meaning that it was harder for them to drop back and create a 2v1 against the two Chelsea wide attackers on the flanks. And so what Chelsea were able to do is work the ball into Callum Hudson-Odoi and Ziyech on the flank and create a 1v1 situation against Tottenham's fullbacks. And this is exactly where their first goal came from. Now when Callum Hudson-Odoi receives the ball on the left flank, even though Doherty ahead of him is in close proximity, he's able to turn Tanganga relatively easily. And the reason he was able to do this was Tanganga was already booked, so couldn't risk lunging in, making a tackle and potentially getting a second yellow. And the Tottenham right back had picked up that yellow card in the first half from the exact situation I described previous, with Hudson-Odoi isolating him in a one-on-one and Tanganga bringing him down on multiple occasions, eventually receiving the yellow. So for this goal specifically, Hudson-Odoi's width allows him to receive the ball and turn Tanganga, and because of the previous isolation of Tanganga, he can't bring Hudson-Odoi down. Hudson-Odoi is able to turn him and run inside, switches the ball to the other side of the box, and Hakim Ziyech's finish is probably one of the best you'll ever see, curling the ball into the top corner in Payet-esque fashion. And despite Tottenham having a disallowed goal in the first half, I do think Chelsea more than deserved the lead, as going into half-time they had recorded an XG of 0.60 to Tottenham 0.08. Now even though Tottenham's issues were created by their midfield line sitting too deep, when they did look to engage Chelsea higher up the pitch in their defensive third, whilst it did look like initially they would solve the problem of Jorginho getting too much time on the ball, this instead just created an issue in a different part of the pitch. As you can see here, Kane and Moura are looking to press the Chelsea centre-backs, and Højbjerg pushes up from the midfield line looking to apply the pressure to Jorginho. However, the rest of the team team is far too deep, meaning that Tottenham's press is not vertically compact, which allows Chelsea to simply play out of that front 5 press, and because Højbjerg's pushed up the pitch, there's a massive space in behind him where Mount can just flow into, receive the ball, and then he can drive the Chelsea attack forward into the Tottenham half. See, if you are going to press a team high up the pitch, the whole team needs to do it. If you just do it with the forward and midfield line, this just creates a massive space between your defensive and midfield line, and this allowed Chelsea to exploit this when Tottenham looked to press aggressively, and when they didn't and had Højbjerg and Winks sitting deep, this just created space between their midfield and forward line, allowing Jorginho to control the play and have a lot of space in the centre of the pitch. See, Chelsea didn't press as aggressively as we saw Tottenham do in that situation, however their press was a lot more efficient and coordinated, and vertically and horizontally compact. Tuchel instructed his side to defend in a 4-1-4-1 shape, with the 2 wide players, Ziyech on the right and Callum Hudson-Odoi on the left, being told to follow Tottenham's fullbacks. And with Ben Davies retaining a deeper position in possession than Tanganga on the right, this gave Chelsea an asymmetric defensive shape, with Ziyech a lot higher up the pitch than Callum Hudson-Odoi on the left side, but Tuchel's side were very good at stopping Tottenham being able to play out of their defensive third, because he instructed Kovacic and Mount to push up aggressively onto the Tottenham midfield double pivot of Højbjerg and Winks, meaning that any time they received the ball they were stopped from turning and playing out, forcing the ball backwards to the centre backs or out to the fullbacks, making it easier for Chelsea to press. So this did result in Tottenham struggling to break down Chelsea's 4-1-4-1 defensive shape, but they were able to progress the ball into the Chelsea defensive third when they looked to transition the attack quickly, and this was exactly why Conte used Bergwijn and Kane as a central front 2. When Tottenham would win the ball back in a deep position with Chelsea's midfield 3 high up the pitch, Tottenham's deeper lying players were instructed to play a quick vertical pass into the feet of either Bergwijn or Kane, and for the disallowed goal the ball went into Bergwijn. He was able to turn Jorginho, who isn't a very good defensive midfielder. He does struggle in these one-on-one situations because his tackling and physicality and athleticism aren't the best, so Bergwijn's able to turn Jorginho and move the ball forward, get him running at that Chelsea back line. He moves the ball out to the left for Sessegnon, and his ball across the box is perfect for Harry Kane, and to be honest, Thiago Silva does go down far too easily, and if the goal had stood I wouldn't have really seen an issue with it. However, Thiago Silva uses his experience, buys the foul, and the goal is eventually disallowed. However, overall I don't think Tottenham can have too many complaints with the result of this game, as they were pretty poor in possession, struggling to create anything of substance apart from that Harry Kane goal. And we can see this when we look at both sides' XG at the end of the game, with Chelsea recording an XG of just 1.04, which isn't the highest, but Tottenham only recorded an XG of 0.33, highlighting the problems they had in creating chances. But before I come on to what I think Conte should have done in this game, let me tell you about Atlantis Football's new collaboration with El Clasico Cases. The company was started by 2 die-hard football fans from Northamptonshire, and they wanted to create unique football cases with iconic football moments that not only protect your phone from damage but also provide an excellent quality design. You've got iconic moments like Chelsea's Champions League win, their FA Cup win in 2010, and Drogba's knee slide, all for Chelsea fans, and for Tottenham fans you've got the 2019 Champions League semi-final win against Ajax. But me being a Manchester United fan, obviously I like the Ronaldo Sue celebration and the Fergie time case as well, and some of the others I like are the Zidane headbutt, the Jamie Vardy celebration, and the Neymar rainbow flick, just to name a few, and you can check out the others on the website, which will be linked in the description below. All of the cases cost below £20, and they've even got a money back guarantee, and if you use coupon code AF at checkout you'll also get a massive 25% off, which would be helping to support the channel and would be very much appreciated. So if I was Antonio Conte, I would have instead started with a 5-3-2 system, bringing in Emerson, Reguilon and Lucas Moura for Doherty, Ben Davies and Sessegnon, and the reason for this from a defensive point of view is that the back 5 would have allowed the wide centre backs to pick up the players who move into the half space. See, Chelsea in that 4-3-3 shape, at times they could have potentially had 4 or maybe 5 players in that front line, and so Tottenham would have been able to have the wide centre backs push out of that defensive line to close down either Mount or Kovacic. This would have allowed Højbjerg and Lucas Moura either side of Harry Winks to sit higher up the pitch, creating a vertically compact pentagon shape with Bergwijn and Kane in front, and with a 3-man central midfield. Whilst this would have given the Chelsea fullback Sarri and Azpilicueta more time on the ball, it would have instead given Tottenham the extra player in central midfield to allow maybe someone like Harry Winks to push out and apply the pressure to Jorginho, and this would have stopped Chelsea dominating that deeper lying central midfield area as much, and with Azpilicueta and Sarr being Chelsea's least creative players from these deeper positions, giving them time on the ball would be a lot more preferable to giving Jorginho time on the ball, and that's exactly what Tottenham didn't do, and Jorginho was a key reason why Chelsea were able to win that midfield battle. And so from a defensive point of view, I do think this 5-3-2 system would have given Tottenham a lot more security in the centre of midfield, giving them a more vertically compact defensive unit. In possession, I also think the back five would have caused Chelsea problems on the flanks. If the two Tottenham wing backs, which in my scenario would have been Reguilón and Emerson, had been positioned in what you would refer to as a relatively deep position on the flanks, then this would have forced Ziyech and Callum Hudson-Odoi to retain deeper positions, as the two Chelsea fullbacks probably wouldn't be comfortable pushing that far up the pitch. This would have pushed Chelsea's midfield into a flat five, giving the two wide centre-backs more space to move out with the ball. Also, by essentially having 5 players in that central area, Tottenham could have players dropping deep and flirting between the lines, looking to pull the Chelsea central midfielders up the pitch and create space between the defensive and midfield lines for Bergwijn and Kane to then drop into and receive the ball. I think this possession shape would have allowed Tottenham to progress the ball into the middle third a lot easier, giving them more control of the game and making them less reliant on quick transitioning attacks, and with better offensive players like Emerson, Lucas Moura and Reguilón on the pitch, I think Tottenham would have created a lot more chances than they did in this game. So let me know what you think in the comment section below, subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you haven't already. Definitely check out those phone cases if you are interested. It would help support the channel, so I'll leave that linked in the description below, as well as some other videos that I think you may enjoy.